Hey guys, this video we're going to talk about Viveza 2. Viveza 2, which is part of the NIC software package, something that you guys probably hear us talk quite a bit about. And the NIC software package just offers so many tools. It's hard to ignore them. And Viveza 2, this is one of the most powerful tools within the NIC software package. We'll go ahead and get started. You can see the panel down here. I've got the NIC panel already open. For those of you that may not use NIC exclusively or not very often but have it downloaded, you can simply go up to Filter, NIC Collection, and click on Viveza 2. When you do, it's going to open the Viveza 2 control panel. And once it opens, you'll recognize that it has the slider capabilities, much like what you would find in Adobe Camera Raw. You can use those same types of sliders to make global adjustments over the entire image, or you can even make adjustments and come down here and grab your brush, and it'll open up a new layer within Photoshop. And it gives you the ability to brush on the adjustments that you just made, specifically where you want them to be made within the image. A problem that can arise by either doing a global adjustment or taking the adjustment you just made, grabbing your brush, going into Photoshop, and brushing on the adjustment is you can sometimes make your application, but man, it can be very hard to be working around tiny little portions of the image and not have your brush affected and bleed into this area that you don't want affected. What they have given us the ability to do is work with control points so we can avoid that. Control points simply work by recognizing both tones and textures in the area that you're telling it to recognize those tones and textures. I'll give you an example. You can see right up here, the top part of the sidebar, add control point. This box right here, you'll simply click add control point, come over here with your crosshairs, determine where you want to place your control point and where you want to really work on your adjustments. I picked this image because there's a lot of texture through here, so I thought this would be a really good one to kind of show you where you can drop control points, how they can affect different parts of the image, and leave other parts of the image alone. So let's start with the first one. I went ahead and I clicked control point. I'm going to drop it here. And as you can see, as I slide down here, and I'm just dragging my mouse over these lines here, you can see that brightness, contrast, saturation, structure, shadow adjustments, all these are the same as what you have in the right sidebar. Okay? So you can either work here, and you can see, if you look over on the right sidebar, see the adjustment being made at the same time. So you can either work within your adjustment here, or you can work from the sidebar over here. This top one, this top slider, gives you your area of influence. So this is going to determine your area in which your adjustments are going to be made. It is going to feather a little bit from that hard black edge that you see. It's not like taking a paintbrush and giving it a hard edge and you just have this solid edge where your adjustment ends or begins. So it will feather on you. And I'll show you here in just a minute. So what we want to do is we want to really concentrate on these clouds. So I'm going to set my area of adjustment. And you can see that it's bleeding out into the water here, but I made it as large as I could to encompass as many of these clouds as I can, okay? So I'm going to click on my control point. I'm going to start making my adjustments. And I simply want to bring out just a little bit of the mood that was in those clouds that morning. Nothing crazy. Just a little adjustment just to give it a little bit of pop. If you come over here to the right sidebar, you can see where our control point number 1, you can see control point list. Control point number 1 is the one we just created. As long as this toggle off and on, as long as that is on, the adjustment is made. If I want to see before and after, I can click it on and off. And I can see what it looked like before and what it now looks like now that I've made the adjustments. To the right over here, you'll see the masking icon. So what this is telling you is in this column for all control points made, when you toggle this on, it's going to show you the mask that it created solely for this control point. The white shows everything that the adjustment is affecting 100%. All of this area is being affected 100% by the adjustments I just made. Black is 0. It's not being affected at all by the adjustments I just made. The gray in between is going to work in variance, in percentage. So the darker the gray, the less it's being affected. The lighter the gray, the more it's being affected by the adjustments I just made. And as you can see, it's already done a really good job of masking out the pier. So this pier, anything in black is not being affected. You can see that this is gray, so it's being affected somewhat. But all this black is meaning it is masked out and not being affected by these adjustments that I just made. We'll make a control point for the top of this here in just a minute so I can show you how to eliminate that. I'm going to go over here, turn my mask off. Well, let me turn it back on real quick. You see this area down here that's being affected? Man, when I created this, I really wanted it to only affect the clouds. But you can see that it found some light tones and textures down here in the water. So now it's affecting this as well. Well, I want to create another control point down here so I can make adjustments just like I did for the clouds, but only down here. I don't want these control points that I just made for the clouds to also affect my water down here. I'm going to go over here and turn my mask off. Reach up here to the top, click on Add Control Point. I'm going to come over here to the water, just find me some random spot over here. Nothing major because all this is pretty much the same. Again, I'm going to increase my area of influence. And without making an adjustment at all, I want to show you how good this software is about letting these control points talk to one another. Now that this control point has been put in place, if you look over here to the right, control point number 2, now that this control point has been created, it's telling control point number 1, hey, don't sweat this area down here, this area here, because I got it. No, Siri, I was not talking to you. Again, sorry, Siri interrupted me there. Without making any adjustments at all, I'm going to reach over here and I'm going to turn on, again, control point number 1, where we began. If you remember, a lot of this down here was kind of a white and gray, meaning it was being affected. But now that I've created a control point number 2, look what's happened. Now it's blackened out. Now this control point is not affecting this down here. I'll turn it on, and that shows you in addition to control point number 2 and what it's controlling. I'll turn off control point number 1 and show you it's highly concentrating on the water. And it's not really interfering up here because I had already created control point number 1. But in conjunction, you can see the area in which is being affected within the entire image. Huge, huge tool. So now I can make these adjustments. I'm going to mess with the structure, and you can see, I'm going to just go crazy with it so you can see it's grabbing a little bit of the sky above the water, but not much. But I can create a control point simply for this area if I want. That will eliminate this control point and this control point from this area. This area can have its own control point. But just so you can see, even though that circle is reaching up into the clouds, most of the intensity of the adjustments is being made solely in the water. So it's just a really good masking tool, if nothing else. Its ability to detect tones and textures on its own with you telling it very, very little is just super, super, super impressive. All right, like I showed you, I'm going to turn both these masks back on. You can see this gray. See all this white. This is being affected by both the control points that we made. All this black is being eliminated from the control points that we made, but you can see, I'm just going to use this as an example. The top of this cover down here is still gray. So it's being affected by a certain percentage. I'm going to turn these off. I'm going to come up here, grab control point. I'm going to set it right on top of that green. I'm going to bring my area of influence down because it doesn't need to be that large. And again, without making any adjustments at all, I'm just going to show you its masking capabilities. Look at that, solid white, solid white. So if I go back to these, control point 1 and control point 2, these two control points know that this one is in place now, and it's handling this right here. So these two know I don't need to help that out. Control point number 3 has this area covered. So I'm going to turn on control point 1, control point 2. You see how black it is now? It was gray before. It was gray, meaning it was somewhat being affected. But now that I've created its own control point, these two aren't touching it at all. And I didn't have to use a selection tool. I didn't have to get into, zooming way in and getting real precise and making sure my selections were right against the edges and that kind of thing. Man, it's super, super easy, and it can make the difference between night and day, especially when you're working in such large areas and you don't want the smaller portions of the image to be affected. One last thing before we end the video, I wanted to show you the grouping opportunity. You can see right under your control point button, you have the option for grouping. And essentially what that is taking several control points and letting you make one adjustment for all control points. An easy way to do that is I'm going to go here back to control point number 2. As you can see, it's highlighted. Anytime you want to know which control point you're working with, click on it. You come over here and whatever's in orange, that's the control point number that you're working with. So this was number 3. This was number 1. But number 2, I want to duplicate and place throughout the water so I can make a large adjustment with many control points. And the way I'm going to do that is to hold down either my Alt or Option key, right or left click on the control point and just drag it over to another portion of the water. Let go of both, do the same. Hold down my Option Control key, left click on my mouse, drag it over. Same thing, okay? Now that I have these 3, I want to combine the 3 into 1. Remember, this was control point 1, this was 2, this was 3. So this is going to be 4 and 5. 2, 4, and 5. So I'm going to take number 2, number 4, and number 5. And the way I selected that is just by holding down my Command key and clicking with my mouse. Now all 3 are highlighted. I come up to Group, click that. They've all become 1. So you'll just see this one adjustment here, but it's going to affect this control point and this control point as well. See the adjustments? And if I click on the masking option over here to the right, just to show you where it's working, you can see that instead of just working this area right here, it's now all the way over. And if you wanted, you can create more control points down here to get even tighter with your tones and textures. again, just a really great tool within Nick that tends to get overlooked, this control point portion. Let me reiterate, a really good option for global adjustments. It is. Do not get me wrong. But do not ignore this little portion up here. I'm telling you, this will change things for you night and day. I've seen many images to where they've made some adjustments in the sky and it didn't duplicate down below simply because areas were just too small and it was just too difficult to either brush them in, mask them in, or just make a global adjustment altogether. This is a perfect tool for that. You can work in the tiniest of spaces. As you noticed here on control point 3, that is tiny. That is tiny, but that is the only area being affected. And man, that can make a difference between a great image and a superior image. So consider that when you're working within Nick. And as always, if you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to reach out to us. We're always here to help. We'll see you in the next video.